Now, we are going to look at the difference among these three methods: instance, class, and static methods in our class. And we will see how they interact with the data under our blueprint house. So, to illustrate this discussion, we revisit the class house example once again. So, to make some recaps, this is nothing but how can we define class. Class is defined using the class keyword and followed by the class name house ended with colon. The next, this one is class attribute, which is defined next to the class header and defined outside of any method. This class attribute can be shared by the class itself and the instance of the class. But the next statement defines the init method, which is special method and known as constructor in Python. This method takes in a number of parameters, but the first parameter should be self. So, under this constructor, we define these instance variables or instance attributes. These are attributes referring to the instance of our class. Now the color is assigned to this self color, rumus assigned to self rumus, where this self is nothing but helps us to pointing into the instance of the class. Right. But the next statement is a method or function which is defined in our class, which is named as instance method. This instance method acknowledges that an instance attribute is referring to those instance of the house or instance of the class. Now, this instance is common to both our attribute and the method. But the difference is this attribute and method only. Both attribute and method referring to the newly created instance of the class. This, as the name indicates, takes at least one parameter, that is self, as its first argument. Right? This self is nothing but allowing us to access and modify the object's attributes. For example, this instance method retrieves us the information related to the newly created instance of our class. Now, for every newly created object, calling this method prints this information. Now, let us access this information by calling this instance method. Instance method has a number of objectives. Accessing and modifying the data is one of the possible purposes of using instance methods. But instance methods are also useful to encapsulate behavior, enable polymorphism, support object interactions. Now, among these four objectives, let us see how to access and modify instance attributes and class attributes. So this instance method. Now let us see how to call this instance method on the objects. Now these objects, house1 and house2, are instance of our class, where this class is the blueprint, which is the template or architectural plan, whereas this house1 and house2 are the real objects built based on the property provided. Here we pass these two parameters as building block of the real house, where house1 takes blue as a color argument, 5 as the number of rooms, now the second one gray, and 7. So what's the objective here is how can we call the instance method on these objects so that we come up with this important information related to those objects. This can be done by stating the object separated by the dot, then calling the instance method. If I run these statements, I come up with these two statements, right? Where the first one is the result of this statement, whereas the second one is the result of this statement. Now, the blue house has 5 rooms of having modern style. This modern style is the information related to the class attribute, which can be shared through this statement. House.style. House is object, which is class object. Right, we know that everything in Python is object. But what's the difference? Naming of each. Now this one is the instance attributes, instance attribute. So we can access this information, which is defined under the instance method by these two statements. Now let us add two important methods to our class. These are class method and static method. Class method and static method are another function type which are defined within our class. But in particular, what is class method and what is static method varies in their functionality and operation. For example, class method operates on class level data, and it takes in class parameter pointing to the class itself. This class parameter helps us to pointing to the class itself, and we can take in another many parameters to this class method to make it of an operation underneath. In particular, what this class method does to verify the shared style. What was the shared style of the class? The style of the houses was modern. Now we are interested to modify it to another style. This modification can be made using the class method, right? So class method is useful when we need to access or modify class level data. This modification in particular is made due to this statement, right? So what other method is static method. Static method is created with the help of static method decorator. Similar to that of class method decorator, this static method also built in class decorator that transforms a method within a class into static method. But the concept decorator is beyond this video, but these two classes creation with the help of decorators will keep as is, right? So in particular, what is static method or what static method does is the main concern of this tutorial. What is special with static method is static method does not take any implicit references like that of instance method and class method, which they take respectively self in instance method, class in class method. But this static method does not depend or does not take in any such references, and this static method does not depend on any instance attributes or class attributes. This static method makes use of any data. It can be internal or external of the class. For example, this static method checks whether a given house is considered to be large or not based on the number of rooms it has. This method determines based on this inequality. Therefore, if the number of rooms or the number passed in to this argument is greater than 5, this method returns true, false otherwise, right? So we can put here any integer number that can be from the instance of our class or from outside the class. Now let us see how can we call these methods on our class or on our instance of class. Testing the class functionality, for example, can be made. This static method is now called on the house object. Any house having this number is now to be determined whether it is false or not in their house largeness, right? It returns false, not large, right? Because this class house with this number is considered to be small house. The same is true house object. What was modern style at the beginning, now it changed into ancient style. Similarly, this class method that passes in the new style, which is ancient, operates on the class object by itself. This helps to change the style of the houses to ancient style due to this statement. So it is functional well. Now, how can we modify the styles again using the instance by themselves? Till now, we have been talking about with the class by itself. Now let us see how the style modifies using the instance. Right? Now the class method modifies style that takes in ancient style now operates on the instance of the class h0. H0 is an instance now, instance of the house. right? Therefore, now the style of house 1 is ancient rather than modern. This is due to this class method, right? We are meeting it, modifying the style of the instance of house class. This can be done using the class method. And let us see the operation of static method on instance 2. This is one instance house 1, right? Now, based on the data passage into the static method from the instance which is house 1, we determine whether it is large or not, right? Is house 1 large? This question waits for this statement output, right? This is nothing but the static method which takes any int number. Now the int number is from the instance attributes operating on the created objects, right? For example, we can see what print h1 rooms. This returns the number of rooms associated with this instance. So this is nothing but this is 7, right? We pass it in 7, but what the important thing here is this 7 is associated with the house 1, which is instance 1. So does the instance 1 or the house 1 is large or not determined by this static method by taking this data, right? Another important thing is how to access class variable or class attribute. This is nothing but by calling the class by itself, separated by dot, and the attribute style. Now house style returns the newly created style or the modified style. Now let us see the result of all. What this false is the result of which statement is nothing but this one. House is house large, taking this number is not greater than 5, then it returns back this value false, right? And what is this print is ancient, right? What's the newly or the modified style of the class house is nothing but the updated one, which is ancient. What's the next? This one. This acts on the instance. What's the difference between this one? This statement acts on the class by itself, but this one acts on the instance h1. This is similarly retrieves ancient also. This one, right? What about this one? Is it true? Is house 1 large? True, because this house 1 rooms provided number 7 when number 7 is greater than 5. True. The style of the newly created house is ancient. This is how to access class attribute. This is usual. So these are nothing but what's the difference between instance method, class method, and static method in object-oriented programming.